Hey guys, Dr. Jeff Finley here, and welcome to Mythbusters number 2. This month we're going to focus on the connection between salt content or salt intake and high blood pressure. Now, it's a commonly held belief that too much salt in your diet causes high blood pressure. This has produced the craze over low sodium soups, canned goods, and various foods. This has also produced the DASH diet that helps basically reduce your sodium intake. But is salt really the enemy that we think it is? Let's take a look at this month's Mythbuster, salt and high blood pressure. Now, when we lose salt, it's usually because we're sweating or anytime that we have to use the bathroom. Our body has no ability to produce it on its own, so we have to get it through our diet. Sodium is crucial, though, for maintaining proper muscle and nerve function, as well as electrolyte balance. So there is, in fact, a purpose and benefit to having it, but when or why did we become so afraid of it? Well, the salt phobia started in 1972 when the government did a rat study where essentially they gave these rats an absurd amount of salt and it gave them high blood pressure. Now, to make that clear, to reach this same level of salt, you would have to eat over 500 grams of sodium in one day. To put that into perspective, an adult usually has about 3.5 grams of salt in a day in the U.S. So to get to that 500 grams, you'd have to eat 4.5 cups of table salt. Yuck. It's important to keep in mind that while animal studies do help form theories, we are not rats. Thus, any information pulled from animal studies will have limitations due to species. Well, after the rat study came the most famous study of them all. This is what was known as the InterSalt study. This study measured average salt consumption and blood pressure levels in 52 groups randomly chosen from over 32 countries. Great group of people. That's a phenomenal sample size. Now, the study measured sodium intake against two things: increase in blood pressure with age and the average blood pressure of the entire group. Now, what they found was there was absolutely no correlation between salt intake and blood pressure. However, what they did include are what are known as outliers, meaning statistically speaking, there are anomalies that throw off their findings if you decide to include them. For example, if you charted the days that you ate salads when it was cloudy, there would be bound to be days that correlate to low salad consumption and cloudy days. But that doesn't mean it's only cloudy because you didn't eat enough salad. Thus, you would throw out those outliers and just use the data that was relevant. Now, these outliers found in the study are not only statistically insignificant, but they're also potentially due to factors that had nothing to do with salt consumption. Now, in the comments, you'll see a picture of the graph, and I circled what the outliers look like, just so you kind of understand what that looks like. Well, the government took this study and ran with it and created all these low-sodium products to help with the salt craze. But the other unfortunate problem with this study is that while diverse, it looked at different groups that are so hard to compare that they're nowhere close to each other. For example, they looked at Indian tribes and compared them with big city living in America, or Europeans and compared them with Vietnamese people. Blood pressure is such a complex topic, as I just wrote about in this month's newsletter. It's hard to just narrow down salt as being the only factor for increase in blood pressure. Stress is another huge factor, and so it's really unfair to compare these groups since they live such different lifestyles and say, well, the only factor that binds them is their salt intake. Sorry, I'm not buying it. Well, then came 1997, and the famous DASH study came about. This is where they were looking at correlation of salt intake through diet and what dietary changes could do for blood pressure. This also sparked the craze of the DASH diet. Now, in the study, they held salt intake at a pretty constant level and found that a diet high in fruits, vegetables, and low-fat dairy actually produced a benefit for blood pressure much clearer than anything salt restriction studies have been able to find. Now, the study was again reviewed in 2001. This did show that large reductions in salt slightly lowered blood pressure. So, again, this is where the DASH diet gets all its popularity because, hey, this can lower blood pressure. But oddly enough, is when they reviewed this further, they found that there was no benefit to lowering your blood pressure by reducing your salt intake, meaning you didn't live longer, you didn't have a lower risk of heart disease or anything along that lines. It also showed that even at the same level of salt intake, the DASH diet does outperform a standard American diet. So the problem really isn't just salt. There has to be something else influencing the blood pressure. So what does it really come down to? And what it actually comes down to is your sodium-potassium ratio. Now, potassium is another nutrient found in fruits and vegetables. This, not salt, is what actually helps to determine what your blood pressure is going to be. When you are following a diet, something such as the paleo diet, you are increasing your intake of fruits and vegetables, all high in potassium, and this, while is a lower sodium diet, is what is actually helping lower your blood pressure. And believe it or not, this is also why the DASH diet helps. It's not necessarily because you're lowering salt intake, it's because you're focusing on fruits and vegetables. So rather than spending all your time trying to find low sodium canned goods or being afraid to add table salt to your meals, the best thing that you can do is focus on non-processed, whole foods, specifically fruits and vegetables. So as always, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you found this information interesting and fascinating. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic, so leave them in the comments below. But otherwise, we will talk to you guys next time. Thanks.